Hello, I'm the real-life fake wizard. On January 13th, 2026, Meta announced they were laying off over 1,000 employees from their Reality Labs division. That's bad, but this is more than just laying people off. They're shutting down entire gaming studios. Studios that just released games. Studios that made some of the higher-end VR titles, like Twisted Pixel, the studio behind the very recent Deadpool VR game. Completely shuttered. That game only just came out in November of 2025. Sanzaru Games, the team that made Asgard's Wrath 2, one of the most acclaimed VR games of all time, gone. Entire studio closed. Armature Studio, the people who ported Resident Evil 4 to VR, is now closed. Camouflaj, the studio behind Batman Arkham Shadow, again, a game that came out just recently. A near total layoff with a skeleton crew remaining. All future projects from this studio canceled. These weren't failing studios. These weren't mediocre teams making shovelware. These were some of the biggest VR developers in the world, making the biggest games on the Meta platform. And Meta just erased them. My friends, VR gaming as we knew it is seemingly over, and what killed it tells us something important about where the entire entertainment industry might be heading. Today's indie game shoutout is Soulstone Survivors. Face the Lords of the Void and their endless minions. Collect their soulstones and become a god. In this action roguelite, unveil secret spells, craft mighty weapons, unlock multiple characters, discover game-breaking synergies, and conquer the power of the void. To learn more about this and hundreds of other indie games, visit fakeportal.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Now back to the video. Back in 2021, 2022, when Zuckerberg was doing his big metaverse push, my team and I were paying attention, not just as gamers, but as business owners. In the real world, I run a marketing company, and when Meta started pouring billions into VR and talking about the metaverse and the future of social interaction, we all thought, okay, this might be the next frontier. This could be where advertising goes. This could be where we need to responsibly take our clients. So we bought Metaverse 2s, multiple units actually. We wanted to understand the space. We wanted to see if this was something we should be preparing our clients for. The talk of virtual storefronts, immersive brand experiences. I mean, they made it sound like it was going to be Times Square level marketing with billboards everywhere, all the time, always. And you know what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing came of it. The advertising opportunities never materialized. The user base never reached the critical mass needed for marketing to make sense. The whole metaverse as the future of commerce angle, a fantasy, a quickly declining fad that we watch deflate in real time. The metaverse belongs up there with the Bored Ape NFTs on things that were promised and never materialized. Now, that doesn't mean I regret the purchase entirely, because here's the thing, as a gaming device, I've gotten enough value out of VR. I've spent a ridiculous amount of hours playing Blades and Sorcery, specifically with the Star Wars mods. But that's the tragedy of the whole situation. The technology works. When you're standing in a virtual space swinging a lightsaber, it's more exciting and more cost efficient than going to Galaxy's Edge. The problem might not be the technology per se. The problem is the business model. The problem was thinking you could spend $70 billion and brute force mainstream adoption into existence. Let's talk about the money. Since 2020, Meta's Reality Labs division has lost over $70 billion. Last quarter alone, a single 3-month period, Reality Labs lost $4.4 billion on $470 million in revenue. They're spending nearly $10 for every dollar they make. Quest headset shipments are down 16% year over year. The global VR market contracted 21% in Q3 2025. The metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg bet his company on, it's not happening. Not at all the way he envisioned. And so what does Meta do? Do they admit their strategy failed? Do they course correct thoughtfully? No, they fire everyone who is making the good content and pivot to AI. Yeah, it seems that's the play here. Take the billions you were burning on VR and redirect them to artificial intelligence. Zuckerberg is reportedly spending $14.3 billion to poach talent from AI companies. The official line from Meta's spokesperson is shifting some of our investment from metaverse towards wearables. Translation: VR gaming is done. We're making smart glasses now. So what happened? How did we get here? I think there are 4 core reasons why VR gaming failed as a mainstream proposition. Reason number 1, the hardware problem never got solved. VR headsets are heavy. They're uncomfortable. They cause motion sickness in a significant percentage of users. You have to clear a lot of physical space to use it. For the best games, you need a wire plugged into a computer. Good luck if the damn thing disconnects. You might as well put it down and try again tomorrow if you disconnect the cable incorrectly. But every year, companies promised lighter and better headsets. And every year, the improvements were minimal. We went from this is uncomfortable to this is slightly less uncomfortable. CES 2026 showed some genuinely promising prototypes. There's a Play for Dream headset under 100 grams. Pimax has lightweight micro OLED options. Valve's Steam Frame is supposed to be the Steam Deck for your face. But those are prototypes and early releases. The mainstream market has been waiting for next year's headset for over a decade. At some point, people stop waiting. Yeah, I remember being at a gaming conference in 2015 in Atlantic City, and they had the early Oculus on display, and it was a big deal to go and test it out. I tried it for a second and walked away thinking, this could take over the world. But they're very early out. That was 11 years ago, and we're still too early out. Reason number 2, the content library never reached critical mass. If you ask someone to name 10 must-play VR games, most people would struggle with 5. Blades and Sorcery, Beat Saber, Half-Life Alyx, Resident Evil 4 VR, Asgard's Wrath, Super Hot. And then what? I'm at 6 and I've run out. Compare that to any other gaming platform. The Switch launched with Breath of the Wild, and within 2 years we had Mario Odyssey, Smash Bros., Animal Crossing, Mario Kart. PlayStation had God of War, Spider-Man, Last of Us, Horizon. Xbox has problems, but that's a different video. VR never had that library depth. The best games could be impressive, but there weren't enough of them. And now Meta is shuttering the studios that made the good ones, which means there will be even fewer going forward. Reason number 3, the value proposition never clicked for mainstream consumers. This is a big one. A Quest 3 costs $500. For the same $500, you could buy a Nintendo Switch 1 and 4 games, or a used PS5 with a couple titles, or upgrade your PC by $500, or, heavens forbid, get a Switch 2 Mario Kart bundle. And what do you get for your $500 VR investment? Well, then you need to go buy the games. And there's a lot of mediocre ones. And because of how novelty the whole experience is, you'll use the device for a few weeks, and before long, it'll be collecting dust on a shelf unused. I've talked to so many people who bought VR headsets, used them enthusiastically for about a month, and then never touched them again. The novelty eventually wears off. The inconvenience of it all doesn't. VR is genuinely cool, but cool isn't enough to sustain an industry. You need essential. You need, I can't imagine gaming without this. And VR never got there. Reason number 4, everything looks like a demo. This one is harder to articulate, but it's very important. Most AAA VR games, even the ones with massive budgets and large development teams, have this quality about them. They look like tech demos, spectacle experiences, like proof of concept showcases rather than complete full-length games. Part of that is the marketing. VR trailers emphasize the wow factor, someone swinging their arms around, the immersion, the novelty, and that framing, whether intentional or not, makes the games feel like experiences you try once rather than games you sink hundreds of hours into. Another part of it is the actual game design. VR games tend to be shorter, more focused on moments rather than on depth. You play them and you go, wow, that's cool, and then you're done. Obviously, games like Skyrim VR and Resident Evil 4 VR are exceptions to this, but those games can be played without the $500 heavy device on my face. Even Blades and Sorcery, for all my praise of it, it was just a simulation demo for years until June 2024, when it finally left early access and got a complete story mode. And the other part of this demo problem is just perception. When you see a VR game announced, something in your brain categorizes it differently than a real game. It's a VR thing. It's a novelty. It's something you might check out if you already own the hardware, but it's not a system seller. It's not a reason to buy. To mainstream audiences, to the normies who actually drive sales, VR games are skippable. They're optional. They're neat, but not necessary. And when your entire library feels like a collection of impressive demos rather than essential experiences, you've got a perception problem that more than a marketing budget is required to fix. Now, I don't want to be completely doom and gloom here. VR isn't literally dead. It's just different than what was promised. Here's what's actually working. Social experiences. Gorilla Tag hit record usage numbers. VR chat continues to have a dedicated community. People want to hang out with each other in virtual spaces. They just don't want to pay $500 for this privilege when something like Discord is free and exists. Fitness applications. Even with Meta's expensive supernatural app going to maintenance mode, VR fitness has a extremely niche audience. Beat Saber makes people sweat. Boxing games work. There's something there, just not that much. Simulation and enterprise. This is a big one. Flight simulators, training applications, there's industrial uses. The boring applications of VR are actually where the technology makes the most sense. When you need immersion for a specific professional purpose, VR can deliver. PC VR and indies. Steam's VR numbers are actually up year over year. The top played games on Steam VR in 2025 are mostly older titles with active mod communities like Skyrim and Blades and Sorcery. And indie developers are finding niches too. PlayStation VR 2 is still getting games, 40 plus titles announced for 2026. The $399 bundle moved units over the holidays, so Sony hasn't given up yet like Meta has. And Valve's Steam Frame could be interesting. If they can deliver wireless PC VR at a Quest 3 price point, that's a compelling proposition for people who already have gaming PCs but might not have VR tech yet. But here's the pattern. Everything that's surviving is either cheap, social, niche, or PC adjacent. The big budget exclusive VR experiences, the AAA game design from the ground up for virtual reality, that's what Meta just killed. And no one else is stepping up to replace it, at least not yet. But let's zoom out, because Meta's VR collapse isn't just a VR story. It's a gaming industry story. We're watching the end of the subsidized content era. For years, platform holders have funded expensive games to sell hardware. Sony funds God of War to sell PlayStations. Microsoft funds Halo to sell Xboxes. Nintendo funds Mario Kart to sell Switch 2s. Meta tried the same strategy with VR. Fund Asgard's Wrath to sell quests. Fund Batman Arkham Shadow to move bundles. Treat game development as, in VR's case, a loss leader for hardware adoption. It didn't work. $70 billion later, it really didn't work. And here's the scary part for the broader industry. The same math that killed VR gaming is applying everywhere. AAA game development costs have exploded. We've covered this quite often, lots of content creators have. Many games are being made on quasi-$200 million budgets, 5 to 7 year development cycles, thousands of employees. And for what? Games that sell the same or fewer copies than they did a decade ago? Games that need to sell 10 million units just to break even? Games that are increasingly relying on microtransactions and live service models to justify their existence. The gaming industry had 45,000 layoffs between 2022 and 2025. Another 7,500 are projected for this year, and I guess we got our first 1,000 of that 7,500. Every major publisher is cutting staff, closing studios, and canceling projects. Meta's VR disaster is just another dramatic example of a broader trend. The AAA model don't work no more. But Meta isn't abandoning VR. It's very important to be clear on that. They're redirecting the money somewhere else. Artificial intelligence. That's the widely agreed upon bet now. Forget the multiverse, forget the metaverse, forget VR gaming. The future is in AI assistance, AI generated content, AI everything, at least for the Zuck. Zuckerberg is pouring billions into AI development. The Ray-Ban smart glasses with AI integration, sales tripled in the first half of 2025. That's a product that's actually growing. And this pivot tells us something important about where entertainment might be heading. The tech industry spent a decade trying to create immersive virtual worlds. Billions of dollars, thousands of engineers, the best talent in gaming, and it didn't work. Consumers didn't want it. Now, the same companies are betting that AI will succeed where VR failed, that people want AI companions, AI-generated content, and perhaps AI experiences. This might not be you in the comments. Settle down. I hate AI slop. I'm not talking about you. There's a lot of normies out there that have no idea. Do you know that the average person that consumes AI content is either in Gen X or in Gen Alpha? Oh, you mean the two baskets of people that can't tell the difference because they weren't raised to be able to tell the difference? That's what Meta's capturing. That's what Meta's after. And maybe they're right. Maybe this time the technology will find its market. Or maybe in 5 years, we'll be doing another video about how the AI pivot burned another $100 billion. But here's a bigger lesson, and this applies beyond gaming. You cannot brute force a medium into existence. Meta tried. They spent more money on VI than most countries' GDPs. They acquired the best studios, they hired the best talent, they subsidized hardware at a loss, and did everything right from a business investment standpoint. But it didn't matter because consumers didn't want it. This is the same lesson that Hollywood is learning with streaming. You could spend billions on content, you acquire every IP imaginable, hire every star, and if audiences don't show up, none of it matters. This is the same lesson that gaming is learning with live service. You can build the most expensive game ever made. You can market it relentlessly. You could do everything right. And if players don't engage, you're Concord, or you're the upcoming High Guard. You're shutting down in 2 weeks. The entertainment industry has been operating under the assumption that enough money solves any problem, that you can buy your way to success. But that's not true. And it's never been true. Money can help solve problems only as far as you have the brain to think yourself out of the problem. Throwing money at things often just burns up money for no reason. And whether it's Hollywood gaming, or in this case, VR gaming and the metaverse, you can burn all of Zuckerberg's money up, but that doesn't mean they have any ideas worth burning that money for. VR gaming is not completely dead, but Zuckerberg's dream certainly is. The dream of mainstream adoption, the dream of VR as the next evolution of gaming, the dream of everyone strapping on the headsets and entering virtual worlds. That dream died in a conference room at the Meta headquarters when someone looked at the numbers and finally said, "What in the hell are you doing?" VR will survive in some form. The technology is too interesting to just disappear, but it'll be niche. It'll be a hobby. Remember when they thought this would be the future? Well, the future is somewhere else now, and we'll be here waiting. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire, and for the love of God, cancel Disney+. End of script. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that. Did I just pull a Joe Biden? Double chocolate chip. Corn Pop was a bad dude. All right, fine. Bye.